Hey everybody, welcome to the video. It's Sunday, April 18th, and we're breaking down this 9-game day slate that we have over on DraftKings today. And if you find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button, turn the notification bell so you don't miss out whenever I post new content. If you want to follow me over on social media, I'm at Pennell16 on Twitter and CPen16 over on IG. And if you want to help support the channel over on Patreon, link is down below for that. If you want access to the entire data sheet, all the statistics you want for baseball, each and every single day. The Discord community projections, optimizer, ownership projections, rankings, cheat sheets, data sheets, all that fun stuff. It's available in the link down below. And if you guys are interested in NASCAR, I'm going to be doing my own live stream at 1 p.m. Eastern on this channel, talking over the NASCAR DFS slate for this weekend at Richmond Raceway. But I think that's it for the plug. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as per usual, we'll start with the pitching, then move on to the bats. But we got two really good aces up top and two of the best pitchers in all of baseball, Gerrit Cole and Shane Bieber. You can't go wrong with either. As of right now, I feel like I like Gerrit Cole just a little bit more. Both pitchers are in hitter-friendly park, so it is a downgrade for them. But the matchup versus Cincy and Great American Small Park does worry me just a little bit with Shane Bieber because there are some decent lefties in that lineup that could get to him, but it's still Shane Bieber, so I don't really have any concerns there, and he's a little bit cheaper. If you can play both today, that might be the best way to go because the SP2s are not strong at all. I know I have Steven Strasburg and John Means here, but these guys are by no means any locks to have decent games. You know, the velo is down with Steven Strasburg, and John Means is always a wild card. So we'll see how that goes. So if you can try to double spend up at pitch today with Cole and Bieber, that might be the best way to go and just try to get value bats that are in some halfway decent spots. Maybe you can afford to spend up for like one or two guys and just to fill the rest of your lineup out with value bats. So that might be the best way to go as of right now, just kind of spitballing there. But anyway, Gerrit Cole, $10,400. He's the most expensive pitcher on the slate, but it is a pretty good spot here versus the Tampa Bay Rays. This is a team that will strike out quite a bit. Now, they have some good pieces on offense. Austin Meadows, Arozarena, Brandon Lau, Randy Diaz isn't too bad, and there's some other decent bats in there as well, but they will strike out quite a bit. Now, the one thing, anytime they're outside of the Trop, it's always a nice boost for the bats because it's a terrible place for hitting. Yankee Stadium definitely does favor batters, but this is still a team that will strike out a lot, and Gerrit Cole is one of the best strikeout pitchers in baseball. We look at the daily team sheet at their current projected lineup, and we'll look specifically versus righties. I can show you the strikeout upside in this lineup. So they have the second highest K rate in the league versus righties compared to the other lineups today. Meadows is at 31% versus righties, Arozarena at 37%, Lau at 26%. Diaz and Wendell, those are the tougher strikeouts right there, only 10 and 19%, but everybody else, 33, 26, 44 for Zunino. Then Willie Adames, I'm not really sure, 29.7%. So there's definitely going to be some strikeouts to be had for Gerrit Cole here, and I could definitely get on board with him having a pretty solid game here. There's a 3.14 implied team total against him. Very heavy favorite in an 8.5 K prop over in Vegas. The year before last year, sitting around 40% K rate. That went down a little bit to 33%, but still overall some solid numbers. He's got around 30 strikeouts in 3 games so far this season, so nothing to be too concerned about with Gerrit Cole. He will give up some lefty power, so maybe a guy like Lau or Meadows could take him for a solo shot at some point in the game, but we should still expect like probably 8+ strikeouts in this game, which is just fine for me. So I like Gerrit Cole quite a bit. Then Shane Bieber, $10,000. Going up against the Reds, who've had a really good offense so far to start the season, so that's the one thing that concerns me. But Shane Bieber is arguably the best pitcher in baseball. I do know Jacob deGrom exists, so I'm not going to say he's definitely the best pitcher in baseball, but he has been amazing since last season, and I just don't see any signs of him slowing down. So far this season, he scored 26, 30, and 43 DraftKings points, and he struck out 12, 12, and 11. So I would be surprised if he doesn't get us like 8 to 9 to 10+ strikeouts here. Since last season, he's got a 41% K rate, a 1.6 ERA, a 2.04 xFIP, only a 3.36 implied team total here in Vegas. He is a decent favorite. And similar to Gerrit Cole, an 8.5 K prop over in Vegas. Doesn't really give him much power, which is good because he's playing in Great American Small Park, which does favor hitting. It's kind of like baby cores over there, it seems like. So yeah, Shane Bieber, if you got the money for both of these guys, I would absolutely love to pay for both of them. I know it's going to take a hit on your bats, but you should still be able to afford one expensive bat or two, and you spend down everywhere else. But it might just be worth it to lock in your near 30 points from these guys, because the other pitchers on this slate, some of them are overpriced and some of them are just really hard to trust. So I'm going to try to get both in. I don't typically like to go above $20,000 for pitching, but I might just make an exception today. Freddie Peralta, $9,500. He's a good pitcher in a good spot. It's just nearly $10,000. $500 more you can get Shane Bieber. So I really feel like Freddie Peralta is a bit overpriced here. But if you can't do the double spend up and you have to go like a Bieber Peralta or a Cole Peralta, I don't hate the idea of doing that because Pittsburgh's not a very good lineup. Only a 3.12 implied team total against him, which I believe is the lowest on the entire slate. Pretty heavy favorite, 7K prop over in Vegas. He's had a great last 2 starts, and he has plenty of strikeout upside as well. Last season, he had a near 40% K rate. He was sitting at 38% last season, 3.23 xFIP. Does walk some guys, but doesn't really give up too much power, and that Pittsburgh lineup has virtually no power in their lineup whatsoever. Looking at their numbers last season versus righties, 25% K rate, doesn't really walk too much, only a 133 ISO, 209 batting average, and a 64 WRC+. I know it's a hitter's park in Milwaukee, but there's not really that many good hitters on Pittsburgh to be too scared of, so I think Peralta's a decent option. Just feel like he's kind of overpriced at that price point. I mean, only $500 less than Shane Bieber. It's kind of hard to justify that. And then the really sketchy SP2s here, Steven Strasburg and John Means. So Strasburg, you're probably thinking, this is a talented pitcher, only $8,300 versus a soft Arizona team. Seems like that's a pretty easy play, which you would think so, but the velo's down. He kind of got rocked on his last start. He was really good in his first start, had around 20 DraftKings points, but last start, I know there was pictures of him rubbing his shoulder, which could be a concern if he's going out there injured. I know Steven Strasburg's a guy that's always been battling injuries, so it's kind of hard to trust Strasburg here. I feel like he's a massive wild card. If he's on his game, $8,300 is a really good price point for him, and Vegas doesn't hate him here. 3.56 implied team total, decently heavy favorite, 6K prop over in Vegas. I just do worry about the velo being down. But this Arizona team without Ketel Marte, and even with Ketel Marte, it's not even that great of a lineup. So if you're playing Strasburg, it might be smart to do a hedge stack against him in tournaments. So if you want to do like a Calhoun, just the other guys, the lefties on the Arizona Diamondbacks, I know Josh Ramirez there, Josh Rojas. So if you want to do like a hedge stack versus Strasburg and play Strasburg in one lineup, that might be a decent way to go, because I feel like Strasburg's either going to be very hit or miss here. So you got to be very careful with him here. But there is some upside. I mean, he's a talented pitcher. It's just, these days he's definitely wearing down. Then John Means, $8,000. It's mainly just picking on Texas here. They're just a terrible team versus left-handed pitching, and I feel like he can be a halfway decent option for the price point versus the Rangers, just because their lineup absolutely sucks versus left-handed pitching. They're not that great versus righties either, but if we go over back to the daily team sheet, their numbers versus lefties, I'm pretty sure like dead last in almost every single category in the league. So yeah, pulling up their splits versus lefties. Okay, overall they're kind of dead last, but versus lefties, they have the second to worst walk rate, the highest strikeout rate, pretty much dead last in OPS, on base percentage, slugging, WRC+. If they're not last, they're just pretty much right next to it. Second to last in ISO, or I should say third to last, second to last in WOBA. Overall, some pretty poor numbers. And look at the strikeout upside in this lineup. Some of these guys have very small sample size, but 12% for Falefa, 70% for Lowe, 43% for Gallo. Garcia's at 60%. Some of these guys are a lot smaller sample sizes, so it's going to skew the numbers a bit, but even if you take those guys out, these guys are pretty bad lineup versus left-handed pitching. So John Means, while I typically like to try to use batters against him because it will give some hard contact, he always seems to kind of get by. He did have a good first start to the season, only a 4.05 implied team total against him. Is a slight dog here, but he is going up against Cal Gibson, and Cal Gibson can definitely give some runs to the Orioles. So if we get a cheap win here from John Means, it was like 5-6 innings, give up a couple runs, and gets a handful of strikeouts. That's not a bad start. He does have some strikeout upside as well. 24% K rate, has a nice changeup as well. So I do think Means is somewhat viable, but that's going to be it for the pitching. So with that being said, let's move on to the bats. And as per usual, we'll start with the catcher position, move around the diamond, and hit the outfield as well. Not loving a lot of the bats today, but there's a couple of decent spots here. I don't think we have any team totals above 5 right now. That could change as we get closer to first pitch, but start up top with Yan Gomes, $4,100. Liking the Nationals a lot today. I think they're going to be the best stack on the entire slate as of right now, because Madison Bumgarner is on the mound, and he is not a good pitcher these days. Back in the day, fantastic pitcher, but nowadays, I mean, he just doesn't have any more, and he really struggles versus right-handed bats, and he has not been good so far this season as well. And Yan Gomes has always been a pretty decent hitter. Last year, he batted .284 in 119 plate appearances. Has some decent pop and ISO close to 200. Doesn't really strike out much either, and has a decent fly ball rate for a catcher. So Yan Gomes definitely in play. And if you want to look at Madison Bumgarner's splits versus right-handed bats last season, they haven't gotten much better so far this year. He had a 6.74 xFIP, 12% K rate, near double-digit walk rate, 333 ISO given up, and a 618 slugging with a 45% fly ball rate and a lot of hard contact as well. Actually, a 46.7% hard contact rate with 3.3 home runs per 9 innings given up. So the righties here in the Nats are going to grade out as fantastic plays. And Gomes splits versus lefties, pretty good. Only a 6% K rate, OPS close to 1,000, 135 WRC+, and a 346 ISO. So definitely liking all the righties on the Nats today. Omar Narvaez, $3,700 going up against Chad Kuhl in Milwaukee, in a hitter-friendly park in Milwaukee. And Chad Kuhl is a guy who's not terrible, but he will struggle with the left-handed bats. And Omar Narvaez has always been a guy I don't mind using versus right-handed pitching. We pull up cool splits last season versus lefties. It's pretty bad. 15% walk rate. Had a decent strikeout rate, but a 5.8 xFIP. Hard contact rate of nearly 40%. So the lefties do grade out pretty well for me on the Brewers today. I wish Christian Yelich was playing because I'd be pretty inclined to do a full stack on the Brewers, but I mean, you can still full stack them, but I'm probably just going to take like a handful of players and not really try to full on stack them. Then Jorge Alfaro, $2,500. If you're just looking for some cheap power on Miami, it's definitely not a great park for hitting. They only have a team total of 4.23, and Alex Wood's not the worst pitcher in the world, but he can struggle at some times and get himself into some trouble. So some of the righties on Miami I do think are decent value plays today, especially if you're double spending it for pitchers. So if you're going Cole and Bieber, you need some value plays, and these Marlins players are pretty much free for the most part. I do have a couple listed, so I don't think they're a bad cheap value stack today to make it work up top with the pitching. And going down to first base, it's looking like a good spend down position for me. Not really liking any of the spend up options. There's a couple, but I'm not really sure you're going to have the money for it. So for a roster construction standpoint, it probably makes sense to spend down here. So Carlos Santana, $3,900. Going up against Robbie Ray. Robbie Ray is a complete wild card. He can be on his game. He's got that slider working and rack up the strikeouts because we know he's got good strikeout upside. But if he's missing with his pitches and he's got to throw a bunch of fastballs to make it up for in the count, if he gets behind in the count, I mean, you could definitely rock this guy. He's very hit or miss. So if he's off his game, Kansas City could be one of the best stacks in the entire site. If he's on his game, they're probably going to get dusted because it's not the best lineup in the world. Looking at Robbie Ray's splits last season, it kind of paints that picture. He had a 5.84 xFIP, a nice strikeout rate, close to 30%, but he can walk a lot of guys. He really struggles with his command, and near 20% walk rate, 261 ISO given up, and he gives up a ton of fly balls. And only had a 24% ground ball rate last year, and a 51% fly ball rate with a 40% hard contact rate, with nearly 2.3 home runs per 9 innings given up. So Robbie Ray, complete wild card, but he's the kind of guy you can certainly stack against because when he's off his game, he is off his game. Josh Bell, $3,800. He's a switch hitter, so he'd be having the platoon advantage here versus Madison Bumgarner. And like I mentioned earlier, he really, really struggles with right-handed bats. So Bell hitting in a prime spot in that order definitely makes sense to me at that price point. Then Jesus Aguilar, $3,400. I kind of mentioned this with Alfaro, but I do like the Marlins righties. It's just kind of cheap plays just to try to fit in expensive pitching today. Alex Wood's not a terrible pitcher, but I wouldn't say he's an elite pitcher either. It's not a great park for hitting, but Aguilar's the kind of guy that does have some decent splits versus left-handed pitching. Last season, a 405 WOBA, 321 batting average, 160 WRC plus, OPS close to 1,000. So I think Aguilar's a fine play for the price point if you need some value at first base. Then dropping down to second base, he's also eligible at first base, but Keston here at $4,400. So I rostered him yesterday. I think it's the first time he's done anything for me all season long. I know recently he's been kind of picking up the pace, but I was playing him a lot to start the season, and he was doing absolutely nothing for me. But over the past couple of seasons here has shown that he can hit righties a little bit better than lefties, so I think he's perfectly fine. And the Milwaukee Brewers stack is certainly in play here versus Chad Kuhl, who's just not that great of a pitcher. Then Josh Harrison, $4,100. Just another righty here versus Madison Bumgarner. He has some pretty good splits versus left-handed pitching. Looking at his numbers last year, 278 batting average, 108 WRC plus, only a 12% strikeout rate. Doesn't really walk much, but still, it doesn't really strike out too much, which I do like. So I think Josh Harrison's a fine play in the middle of the order for the Nationals at a fair price point as well. And then if you want a guy that's probably going to strike out when you play him, but it's Rougned Odor, $3,000. He's just a cheap Yankee bat. Yankees bats aren't the worst stack in the world today. They're in a hitter-friendly park in Yankee Stadium, and Andrew Kittredge, I mean, Rays are going to throw a couple of pitchers out there, but you should have the righty and lefty matchup here to start, and he's not a pitcher that really scares me too much. And Odor, he'll strike out a ton, doesn't really hit for a high batting average, but the one thing that works in his favor is he gets a lot of fly balls, and he has some decent pop in his bat with a 246 ISO last season. So don't hit Odor just as a cheap home run play for the most part. Then dropping down to third base, we have Jose Ramirez, $5,200. If you're spending all the way up, J-Ram, he's in a great spot here in Great American Small Park, a park that definitely favors bats and definitely gets a lot of home runs as well. And Ramirez was an absolute monster versus left-handed pitching last season. Some of the best overall numbers in the league, 315 ISO, 164 WRC plus, doesn't really strike out too much, 51% fly ball rate, and some overall really elite numbers. So if you got the money for J-Ram, a really nice one-off play, because I'm not really looking to stack up the Indians today, because Wade Miley's not a terrible pitcher. Looking at his numbers last season, he's the kind of guy that can get a lot of ground balls, and I hate playing batters against high ground ball guys because there's just not as much home run upside. Only a 19% fly ball rate last year. Doesn't really strike out anybody, but it's just hard to really stack against those high ground ball guys. Like stacking against fly ball guys for the most part. But I do think J-Ram's a pretty solid play there just because he's one of the best players in baseball. Starlin Castro, 3,400, just kind of a similar play to Josh Harrison where they're similarly priced and they're going to be hitting in the middle of the order. Starlin Castro a little bit farther back, but he's got some decent splits versus lefties, and Bumgarner just is not very good versus right-handed bats. And last season, it was a very small sample size, but he was very good versus lefties. 500 batting average, 241 WRC plus, 1,200 OPS. Doesn't really strike out too much. So, Starlin Castro, I think, is a fine play. Travis Shaw, kind of already mentioned this a few times with the Milwaukee Brewers bats, but I like the lefties here versus Chad Kuhl. You can play the righties as well, but they're in a good spot, good park for hitting. So, Shaw, he's a guy that has some pop versus right-handed pitching, so I think he makes sense there. Dropping down to shortstop, looks like I might spend up a little bit at shortstop just because this is usually a position where we typically spend up these days because there's not that many great value bats. But Trey Turner, $5,700. If salary is not an issue, he's my favorite play in the entire slate versus Bumgarner. Trey Turner is great versus both lefties and righties, and you guys get the idea. Bumgarner sucks versus right-handed bats, but looking at Turner's numbers versus lefties last season, he was great. 375 batting average, 49 WOBA, 357 ISO, 208 WRC plus, just fantastic numbers all around. Only 29% ground ball rate, so he's able to lift the ball as well. And anytime he gets on base, he's a threat for a stolen base. So love Trey Turner today, my #1 play on the entire slate if price is not an issue for you. And Didi Gregorius and Gleyber Torres, these are just two teams that I think are stackable. So if you're going to stack up the Phillies, Didi's a fine option here versus John Gant, who's not a very good pitcher. Also, the Phillies have a decently high implied team total compared to the rest of the slate at 4.55. And Didi, he's a fine hitter. I mean, doesn't really strike out too much, hits for contact for the most part. He's got some decent pop in his bat as well. So I do like Didi. Gleyber Torres, $4,500. You can certainly stack up the Yankees almost every single slate because of the power they have in that lineup. But I mean, he's just not one of my favorite plays, but he hits in a good spot in the order. He's fairly priced, and they have a team total close to 5 here. So Torres is fine. Dropping down to the outfield, we have Juan Soto, $6,000. If you're stacking up the Nationals, I realize he's very expensive, and if you're playing Soto and Turner, you probably can't get up to Bieber and Cole today together. But if you are going to full stack the Nats, don't leave Juan Soto off your stacks just because it's a lefty-on-lefty matchup. He hits lefties just fine ever since he's been in the league. He's had fine splits versus lefties, and even last year in an abbreviated season, 360 batting average to lefty, 500 WOBA, 420 ISO, 110 WRC plus, 780 slugging, and a 1200 OPS. So do not leave Soto off your stacks, even because it's a lefty-on-lefty matchup. Did have a really high ground ball rate, but it's still Juan Soto. He's one of the best players in the entire league. Bryce Harper, $5,400. Kind of similar reasons to what I talked about with Didi Gregorius. Just a great overall hitter. He's good versus lefties and righties. And the Philly stack does look decently interesting today. I don't think a lot of people are going to be on them, so they could be a nice contrarian stack in tournaments because John Gant's just not that great of a pitcher. I'd say the Phillies bats definitely have more upside in this matchup than John Gant does versus the Phillies. Then we have a couple Indians here in Franmil Reyes and Jordan Luplow. Both guys have decent power versus left-handed pitching, especially Luplow. He's kind of a lefty specialist. Should be leading off here. He's done that in the past versus lefties, and I think his price point's fine. And Reyes is just the power bat in the Indians lineup. So if you do want to stack the Indians just because they're in Great American Small Park, you can do that. But for the most part, I'm probably only taking a couple one-offs here. Jorge Soler, $3,400. I mentioned this earlier with Carlos Santana. You can play guys like Salvador Perez, Whit Merrifield as well. But when Robbie Ray's off his game, he is off his game, and he can serve up some meatballs, and when he gets behind in the count, can't use that slider to his advantage, it can be some trouble times for Robbie Ray. So Jorge Soler is a guy that's got power versus both lefties and righties, had over a 200 ISO last season, like the price point, lots of RBI opportunity, batting 5th, so Soler is a decent option for me. Jackie Bradley Jr., $3,300. He might be one of my favorite plays in the entire slate, just a cheap lefty here versus Chad Kuhl. I think he had a fantastic game last night, if I remember correctly. I want to say he had close to 30 points if he's the guy remembering, but I know the Brewers had a pretty solid game. But like the price point, he hits righties well, hits for a high batting average typically, so Chad Kuhl's not a very good pitcher that I'm too scared of. So Jackie Bradley, I'd say one of my favorite plays on the slate when you factor in the price point. And then DJ Stewart, $3,100. He's just one of those guys I love playing for value because he's got some decent pop in his bat. Kyle Gibson's not a very good pitcher, and he went deep a couple games ago. I think didn't he have like 10 points last night? Maybe I'm thinking of another player, but he got some decent pop in his bat. Strikes out quite a bit, hits for a low batting average, but he does have his 261 ISO last year, and he had a nice walk rate as well at nearly 20% and 38% hard contact rate as well. So DJ Stewart's fine if you need a value bat, but I think that's going to be pretty much it for the video, guys. So I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure you leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out, and I really do appreciate it. It helps with the channel over on Patreon. Link is down below for that. Interested in the optimizer, ownership projections, rankings, cheat sheet, data sheets, Discord community, which there's a lot of people in there talking baseball every single day and other sports as well. It's always a good time in Discord, but I think it's going to be it, guys. I'll stop rambling. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend. Check out the NASCAR content if you want to play NASCAR today. I love NASCAR. It's my favorite DFS sport, so you can come in during the live stream or just watch the video that I put up a few days ago. But yeah, that'll be it, guys. I'll see you in the next video.